Now I'm going to start an unscheduled shift here just from the smartphone device. And you can see that I have 4 questions that require an answer before I can start my timesheet here. The first is a well-being check. So I've got a scale of 1 to 10. How do I feel about my shift today? Feeling good, so good for some feedback from your general staff morale. And then I've got 3 health check questions. So I'm going to say no to those next 2 and yes to having washed my hands, and then I'm able to start that shift. Now I've actually got it set so that if I answer yes to a couple of these or no to one, I can have it trigger so that my manager is notified, and it can even stop me from clocking in or out. So let's amend some of my answers here. I'll say that I'm actually only feeling about 5 out of 10 today. Not that that one will have an impact, but certainly the health ones will. So let's see. Yes, I'm experiencing the symptoms, and let's begin. Now you can see here, the pop-up immediately stops me from starting that timesheet. I'm not permitted to start my shift. Please contact my manager. Okay, let's head into the desktop version now and see how we get these set up. The settings for these shift questions are where the timesheet custom field settings used to be. So to get there, we go to hello, your name up here, and it's global settings we want. The tab we need is timesheets, and as you can see here, it says shift questions. Clicking on here will take us to this customized section where we can actually create these custom field types, decide the order of them, whether they're mandatory or not, any sort of validity or the rules around when these should show, and if there's any conditional triggers based on the answers. Quickly delete all of my pre-existing questions, and we can create 3 examples together. So you can get a really good idea of how you could use these questions. Let's begin by clicking New Custom Field. It's always going to be a timesheet, and decide whether it's active or not. So you could actually create these and make them perhaps only active for certain parts of the year. So that's why we've got the option. Let's give this first one a name. So let's start with something that's obviously very topical at the moment, and we'll do a pre-shift health check. So I shall call this any COVID symptoms. Field details is if we need to give any other description for the question so that your staff really understand what we're asking here. This isn't really necessary for this example, but I'm going to say, please answer yes or no. Then the type of field. So do we want it to be a checkbox? Do we want them to type something? Do we want them to select from multiple options? There's lots of variety here, but for this example, it's just a simple yes or no. So we're going to have the Boolean, the checkbox, yes or no. The validation is, do we want to make this mandatory? Do they have to answer something to proceed with the next question or the clock in or out? So I'm going to say yes, this is a required field. We can ignore the next section, and we're going to decide at what point do we ask them. Is it before or after the shift? So I'm going to say for this one, it's for the clock in. The field conditional rules are important here. We're asking about COVID symptoms. So obviously, if someone answers yes, we're going to want to know about it and decide if there's an action to be taken. So in this example, I want to prevent the clock in and for the manager to be notified as well. This next section determines if there's any areas of the business that you want this to just show for. If it's for everywhere, then we can just leave it all blank. And the sort order, if you have several questions, just determines in which order this one is. So if we're going to create more than one, I'll have this as the first one, I'll put in 1. Okay, we can save this custom field now. And let's take a look at what this looks like. On the smartphone here, I shall go to Start an Unscheduled Shift, any area for now, and you can see there it is. So any COVID symptoms. So if I say no, I'll be allowed to clock in or out. But if I do say yes and press Submit to start, I'm going to be not permitted to start the shift, and the manager will get an email as well. And here is that email. So I've got the exact date and time and the employee, what the question was and why it stopped them from starting the shift. So I know now I could contact Barry directly, perhaps through the newsfeed even, to make sure that he's okay and to advise on next steps. Let's create another custom field now. This time, I'm going to create a well-being check. So let's say I want to know, how are you feeling about work, about your shift today? And then for the extra text, I'm going to ask on a scale of 1 to 10. And the field type this time is a list. Yes, I'm going to make it required. And we're going to enter the values now that I'd like them to choose between. So to do this, we just need to separate the numbers 1 to 10 with a comma. Really quick to do. And again, I'd like this before they start their shift. No rules. And the sort order, I'm actually going to make number 1, and we'll change the previous one to number 2. So this becomes the first one that they see. So let's press save on this. I'm going to go back to the list, and I'd just like to edit with this button here, the original one I made to be in position number 2. And then I'll scroll back up, press save, and let's go back to the list now. Okay, over to the iPhone. Let's head back to the app, and I'll go to start an unscheduled shift now. And now you can see in order is this first question at the top. How am I feeling about my shift today? When I tap on here, I'm presented with those 10 options that I gave. So let's say it's 10. And any COVID symptoms, if I leave it as no this time, I shall be able to start that shift, no problem. There we go. All right, let's create one more example. I'd like to ask my staff members if they're clocking out early, and if they are, to leave a comment. So let's type that as we need it. And then with the additional text, I'd like to ask, if yes, please supply a comment. And again, it's the Boolean checkbox, but you can see I have the option to say that if it's a yes, it requires a comment. So I'm going to choose that one. And yes, I'd like to make this a required field again. And the display timing is going to be clock out and update. So clock out and update means at the point of clock out, and also should they go to update their timesheet after the fact. Now there's a good chance you'll have that setting off, so you may not need to worry about that. On the field conditional rules, I'd like for the manager to be notified should they say yes. Again, it's all areas for me, and the sort order I can just leave as 1 here. There's only actually 1 at the moment for my clock out, so that's fine. Let's press save here. And now let's go over to the phone and let's end this shift that I started earlier. And I press end. You can see I've got this question, are you finishing early today? So if I click yes and press submit, it says, please do provide a comment. So it won't let me clock out without providing that comment. So if I do say yes, I can add in the comments here. Went home sick, for example. And there we go.